Let's talk filters. Now, digital cameras can see a far wider range of light frequencies than the human eye can see. And so they have an infrared filter to screen out the infrared, because that can give, as I understand it, pretty weird effects. But I wonder in doing so whether in fact we alter the image that we see. And so, now look, I don't know, I'm merely speculating here, but we often find that film gives us much more dramatic colours than digital. And I have noticed that when I fit a polarizing filter to a film camera, how when you rotate it you can get a much bluer sky, or darker blue sky I should say, than when you fit one to a digital camera and rotate it. Now, as I understand it, the IR filter doesn't have much of an effect on a polarizing filter. But I do understand that there's two different types of polarizing filters. One is a linear and the other is circular. And so if you don't have a circular polarizing filter, you won't get the same effect on a digital camera. I don't understand what the differences are, but it's worth keeping in mind if you're using a polarizing filter and not getting a dramatic effect. Could it be because you're actually using one of the older style linear polarizing filters rather than the newer or different or more modern circular filter? No idea, but that's just something I came across while researching into filters. Now, on the subject of filters, we can use them to dramatically change the look of the image. And this is particularly true, I think, with digital cameras, in that there's so many more settings in menus. One of which, of course, is to change the ISO, for example, on every single shot. You just don't have that freedom with film. Once you've got a film in there, you've got to set it to the ISO of the film, and that's that. You're stuck with it. Well, you're not. You can change it, but then you've actually got a push process. For example, you know, if you underexpose, you can push process in developing, but you still have to do that to the whole film. You can't do it to individual frames. Anyway, back to the whole concept of filters. Once you stick a film in a camera, as in a film camera, you're pretty well stuck with what it is that you've got. You can put filters on the front, such as a polarizing filter. But when it comes to, and this is what I wanted to cover, I've just got to stop here for a second and look out for traffic. They got roadworks on that corner, and they put a sign in exactly the right spot to shield your view of the road. Anyway, back to filters. And that brings me then to the next subject that I wanted to discuss, which is black and white. Now, some time back, I made a video about shooting black and white, and I dedicated a camera to that, which is the Panasonic GF1. But the experience and the results have been disappointing, and by experience I mean that The GF1 doesn't actually have a viewfinder on it. You rely entirely on the screen on the back. And in bright light, you can't even see that screen, especially if you've put on a filter, such as a polarizing filter, to darken the sky, or even a red filter to darken it even further. And then there is an attachable viewfinder which you can plug in and look through, but it's tiny, and the same applies that in bright light you really cannot see anything through it. So that's the process. And you know, you just take random shots and hope for the best. But that's not the best way to take photographs. But then when I have a look at them later, at home on the laptop, they're often just a whole lot of grey. You know, they're not black and white, but just 50 shades of grey. So they're disappointing. They're not at all like the classic crisp, high contrast black and white that you come to expect from a high quality photographic film. It turns out while I was using a good camera, I had a much better camera for doing that, and that is the Fuji XS10, which I did talk about way back, but which I rarely use. I told you it had been given to me by my brother. He wanted me to have it when he passed, and I haven't used it much for a couple of reasons. One is that I tend to use the Panasonics, I suppose, that I've already got, as in the GH5 and the S5. But the other being that it's also a small sensor. I think it's APS-C, if it is APS-C, or certainly the Fuji equivalent of the APS-C. And we have this kind of obsession with larger sensors. And the S5 is a full frame. Now the GH5 is not, it's micro four thirds, so it's actually even smaller, but I tend to only use the GH5 for things like time lapse anyway, in which case, because it's made into a video, it doesn't really matter whether the resolution is absolutely spot on or crisp, because it's made into a video, and videos, of course, as you know, as I use the S5 anyway, tends to discard a lot of the data, because otherwise the files would be massive, truly massive when you think about it. If you get a 1 gigabyte image or 100 megabytes, whatever it might be, multiply that by 24 frames a second, multiply that by several minutes of film, and you got these gigantic files that would fill up your camera in no time at all. So back to black and white. Anyway, I've been doing a bit of research on what settings I should use on the Fuji, because apparently the Fuji has these film simulations that are unrivaled. So I've been doing some research on what the best settings are. I have set the Fuji XS10 for those settings, and including the fact that you can actually put on a red filter in camera. You don't need to fit one. And I'm just heading out now to pick up some supplies, so while we're out we might let's get somebody broken down over here. Hope they're okay. Looks like they got a buddy helping. You see them in the mirror? while we're out, we'll get some pictures in crisp black and white